Oh my God, look at them. They're like black rats trying to gnaw everything away.
Victoria Caldwell pressed the binoculars to her eyes.
Disgusting. Utterly disgusting. Animals in suits are still animals.
She grabbed her phone and called 911 without hesitation.
Yes, I need the police immediately. There's an illegal black wedding next door. Drugs, weapons, trespassing. Send everyone.
She wanted this wedding wiped out. Every trace of it gone. Meanwhile, at the altar, the groom quietly adjusted his cufflinks. His mother touched his shoulder.
You look so much like your father, darling.
He smiled, gently, softly. He didn't know what was about to happen, and she didn't know who she'd just gotten into a fight with. What happened afterward would completely turn her life upside down. The morning sun hit the Ridgemont estate like liquid gold. Rows of grapevines stretched toward the Blue Ridge horizon, their leaves catching the light in waves of green and amber. White chairs lined the lawn in perfect arcs. A floral arch, white roses, trailing ivy, tiny glass lanterns stood at the end of a stone aisle. A string quartet tuned their instruments beneath an old oak tree whose branches had shaded this land for over 100 years. The air smelled like Virginia wildflowers and fresh-cut grass. This vineyard had history, black history. 3 generations of a family had worked this soil before it was abandoned, forgotten, nearly swallowed by developers. Aaron Underwood bought it back 4 years ago, restored every fence, replanted every vine, rebuilt the stone walls with his own hands on weekends, turned it into something beautiful again. Today, he was getting married on it. Inside the estate's main house, Aaron stood before a tall mirror. His tuxedo fit like it was stitched onto his bones, clean, sharp, not a thread out of place. Morning light poured through the window and caught the edge of his jaw. His best man, Cole Anderson, leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed. "You nervous?" Aaron adjusted a gold cufflink, simple, engraved with his late father's initials. "Not even a little." "Liar." Aaron smiled. Cole had known him since they were 12. Same block, same school, same dream of making it out. Not away from their people, but forward for them. Cole became a federal prosecutor. Aaron went further, much further. But today, none of that mattered. Today, he was just a man marrying the woman he loved. The door creaked open. Evelyn Moore, Aaron's mother, stepped inside. 71 years old, retired schoolteacher. Hands that had graded 10,000 papers now trembled as she held a small photograph. Aaron's father, taken the year before he died. A janitor who worked 3 jobs, morning, evening, overnight, so his son could sit in a law school classroom. She tucked the photograph into Aaron's jacket pocket, right over his heart. "Your daddy worked 3 jobs so you could stand in a room like this." Her voice cracked. "He would have been so proud, baby." Aaron pulled her close. He could smell her lavender perfume, the same one she'd worn his entire life, the same one that meant safety, that meant home. "He's here, Mama. I know he is." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and straightened his lapel one more time. "Now go marry that girl before she changes her mind." Outside, the estate was coming alive. 200 guests filled the chairs. Judges, physicians, teachers, veterans. A retired 4-star general sitting next to a barber from Aaron's old neighborhood. A sitting governor, Philip Anderson, in row 4 with his wife, dressed down, no security detail. A few state senators scattered through the crowd, laughing, hugging relatives, blending in. No one wore titles today. They were just family, just friends, just people who loved these two. Aaron's cousin Lorraine Davis ran the catering, an elegant Southern fusion spread, smoked brisket sliders, honey-glazed cornbread, Sweet tea in mason jars with handwritten labels. Children chased each other between the grapevine rows, their laughter carrying on the warm September breeze. A private security team, led by James Atwell, a retired state trooper, manned the front gate. Every permit was filed, every license approved. Noise variants signed by the county clerk herself. Insurance documentation on file. Nothing left to chance. This wedding was legal, beautiful, airtight. And then there was the neighbor. Victoria Caldwell's estate sat on the opposite hill, a sprawling colonial mansion with white columns and an iron gate. Old money, old walls, old ideas about who deserved to breathe the same air. She stood on her second-floor balcony, binoculars pressed against her face, watching the black guests arrive one by one. Her jaw tightened with every car that pulled through the Ridgemont gate. Her housekeeper, a quiet woman named Ruth, brought out iced tea on a silver tray. "Ma'am, the wedding looks lovely." Victoria didn't look at her. "It looks like an infestation." Ruth set the glass down and disappeared. She had learned, over 11 years, exactly when to become invisible. Victoria had history with that land. 2 years ago, she and her husband Bradley tried to buy the Ridgemont estate. Bradley wanted to develop it. Luxury condos, a golf course, a gated community with a waiting list. They were outbid by a trust fund Aaron had quietly established to preserve historic Black-owned land in the county. Victoria never forgave it. That land was supposed to be hers. Those hills were supposed to carry her name. And now they were full of people she believed had no right to stand on them. She didn't walk over, didn't knock, didn't ask a single question. She just picked up her phone and dialed. Victoria's 911 call lasted 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Every word was calculated. "There's a large unsanctioned gathering on the Ridgemont property. Hundreds of people, loud music. I'm very concerned for my safety." The dispatcher asked what she had observed. Suspicious vehicles everywhere, tinted windows, people carrying bags, boxes. "I don't know what's inside. I pay my taxes. I shouldn't have to feel like a prisoner in my own home." The dispatcher asked if she had witnessed any actual crime. Victoria's voice turned sharp as glass. "I'm watching a crime unfold right now. These people are trespassing. They don't belong on that land. They never have. I've been a resident here for 23 years, and nothing like this has ever happened in our neighborhood." She used the word trespassing 3 times. She hinted at gang activity without saying it. She painted a picture, not of a wedding, but of a threat. Not of celebration, but of invasion. 2 patrol cars were dispatched. 12 minutes later, they rolled up the gravel road toward the Ridgemont gate. Tires quenching slow on stone. Lights off, but radios buzzing with static. Officer Dale Swanson stepped out first. Early 30s, buzz cut, sunglasses on, even though the trees threw enough shade. He adjusted his belt like he was walking into a crime scene, not a vineyard. His partner, Officer Rita Coleman, followed. Quieter, calmer. She looked at the vineyard, the white chairs, the rose arch, the string quartet, and already knew what this was. A wedding. James Atwell, the retired state trooper running private security, met them at the gate. Professional, polite, clipboard in one hand, credentials visible on his belt. "Afternoon, officers. How can I help?" Swanson didn't return the greeting, didn't nod, didn't blink. "We received a report of an illegal gathering on this property." Atwell handed over the documents without hesitation. Event permit, noise variance, property deed, insurance certificate, alcohol license, everything laminated, organized, tucked in clear plastic sleeves. All filed with the county, signed and approved 3 weeks ago. Swanson flipped one page, then handed the entire stack back like it was yesterday's newspaper. "Who organized this event?" "The property owner. He's the groom." Swanson looked past Atwell toward the lawn. 200 black guests, white chairs, sunlight on dark skin. His lips pressed together into a thin line. "We'll need to verify that ourselves." Atwell stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, everything's in order. This is a private ceremony on private land. The permits are right there." Swanson's jaw tightened. "Step aside." Coleman touched his arm lightly. "Dale, the paperwork checks out. Maybe I said we'll verify it ourselves." He keyed his radio, told dispatch the situation appeared to be a private event, but he wanted to confirm. Dispatch acknowledged. Then, a second call came in. Victoria again, more frantic this time, voice pitched high and breathless, like a woman rehearsing panic in front of a mirror. "I just saw someone carrying what looked like a weapon, a long black object. I think it's a rifle. Oh God, please hurry." It was an umbrella. A groomsman had carried a black umbrella from the parking lot in case of afternoon rain. He was thinking about the bride's hair. That was all. But the word weapon changed everything. Swanson's hand drifted to his holster. His posture shifted. His breathing changed. He turned back to Atwell with harder eyes, colder jaw. "There's a weapon report. We're going in." "There is no weapon on this property. I can personally assure." "Step aside or I arrest you for obstruction. Last warning." Atwell stepped aside. He'd worn that same badge for 22 years. He knew how this played out. Arguing with a man whose mind was sealed shut would only give them a reason to use force. The two officers walked through the gate and onto the vineyard grounds, boots pressing into the manicured grass, leaving dull prints behind them. Radios crackling against the soft hum of the September afternoon. A sparrow startled from a nearby vine and vanished into the sky. At the altar, Pastor Raymond Davis had just opened his Bible. The pages caught the wind. The string quartet began the processional, a slow, aching melody that made Evelyn press her handkerchief to her chest and hold her breath. Denise appeared at the end of the aisle. She was breathtaking, a white lace gown catching the afternoon light like it was sewn from it. A bouquet of white peonies trembling slightly in her hands. Her veil drifted in the breeze. Her brother Gerald walked beside her, arm locked with hers, jaw set with pride, eyes already glistening. 200 people rose to their feet. A few pressed their hands to their mouths. An aunt in the fourth row whispered a prayer under her breath. Aaron saw her, and his breath caught. His lips parted, his eyes filled. The entire world, the vineyard, the sky, the music, narrowed to her and nothing else. This was the moment. And then, from the left side of the lawn, 2 uniformed officers appeared. They walked across the grass like they had every right, boots on the green, radio cutting through the music, Swanson's hand near his holster, sunglasses still on, no intention of removing them. Guests noticed. Heads turned, 1 row at a time. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A woman in the 3rd row pulled her daughter onto her lap. A man in the 2nd row, a sitting federal judge, gripped the arm of his chair until his knuckles went white. Denise froze mid-aisle. Her bouquet shook. Her smile disappeared like a candle blown out. Gerald whispered, "Keep walking, Dee. Don't stop." She couldn't. Her feet wouldn't move. Swanson walked straight to the altar. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't glance at the bride. He didn't acknowledge the 200 guests staring at him in silence. He looked at Pastor Davis and said, "Sir, I'm going to need you to pause this. We've received reports of criminal activity on this property." The string quartet stopped. Bows hovered above strings, frozen in place. A glass on the catering table rattled in the breeze. Somewhere behind the last row, a small child whimpered. Silence, thick, heavy, suffocating, fell over the vineyard like a net. Pastor Davis, 64 years old, the man who had baptized Aaron as an infant and buried Aaron's father a decade later, looked at Swanson without blinking. "Officer, this is a house of God today. We're in the middle of a sacred ceremony. And I'm in the middle of an investigation. Step aside, sir." Aaron turned slowly from the altar, jaw tight, hands still, eyes locked on Swanson like he was reading every thought behind those sunglasses. "Can I help you, officer?" Swanson looked him up and down, the tailored tuxedo, the gold cufflinks, the posture of a man who belonged in rooms Swanson would never see the inside of. "Are you the event coordinator?" A ripple passed through the crowd. Someone in the fifth row whispered, "Did he really just say that?" Aaron didn't flinch. "I'm the groom." Swanson's face didn't move, not a flicker. "Well, groom, I'm going to need your ID and proof you're authorized to be on this property." Aaron reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately slowly, because he understood exactly what sudden movements meant for a black man standing before a badge and a hand on a holster, and produced his driver's license. Swanson took it, held it up to the light, tilted it, studied it like a document he was certain was forged. Then he keyed his radio. "Dispatch, running a name, Aaron Underwood, UNDERWOOD. Check for outstanding warrants." Warrants. At his own wedding, on his own land, in front of his bride, in front of his mother. Evelyn's hands began to shake, not from age, from something older. The same tremor she'd felt when her husband was pulled over for driving too nice a car in the wrong neighborhood. The same tremor when Aaron, at 16, was stopped walking home from the library and told to explain himself. It never left. It just hid between the good days. And today, on what should have been the most beautiful morning of her life, it crawled back up through her bones and closed around her chest like a fist. Derek Williams, a groomsman, stepped forward, voice steady, fists clenched at his sides. "Sir, this man owns this property. You are interrupting a wedding." Swanson pointed a finger directly at his chest. "Step back, now, or you will be detained." Derek didn't move. "I said step back." Derek stepped back, not because he was afraid, because Aaron's eyes, calm, quiet, unmovable, told him to, and he trusted those eyes more than his own anger. Officer Coleman leaned in close behind Swanson. "Dale, everything checks out. Permits are valid. There's nothing here." Swanson didn't turn his head, didn't lower his hand. "I'll decide when there's nothing here." And across the property line, standing on the edge of her manicured lawn with the golden light of the afternoon behind her, Victoria Caldwell watched every second of it unfold. Arms crossed, chin lifted, back straight, smiling. Swanson didn't wait for the warrant check to come back. He turned away from Aaron and walked toward the reception area, like he owned every blade of grass beneath his boots, thumbs hooked in his belt, shoulders squared, chin forward. He moved like a man who had already decided guilt and was now hunting for evidence to dress it up. He lifted a tablecloth, peered underneath. Nothing. He moved to the next table, did the same. Nothing. He opened a catering cooler, pulled out a bottle of sparkling cider, held it up to the light, examined the label like it was suspicious, and dropped it back without closing the lid. Ice water splashed across the white linen. Then he walked into the bridal suite, the private room where Denise had gotten dressed that morning. Her robe still hung on the door. Her perfume, jasmine and vanilla, still floated in the warm air. Her mother's handwritten note sat folded on the vanity. My beautiful girl, today you become his, but you were always ours first. Swanson opened the closet, checked behind the curtains, ran his hand along the windowsill, pulled open a drawer. Aaron stood in the doorway, hands visible, feet planted, voice low and measured like a man holding back a river with his jaw alone. Officer, you do not have a warrant. You do not have my consent to search this property. Swanson didn't stop, didn't slow down. I don't need your consent when there's an active threat report. There is no threat. Your partner confirmed it. My security chief confirmed it. Every permit you need has been in your hand since you arrived. Swanson finally turned, stepped closer, close enough that Aaron could smell the stale coffee on his breath, see the pores on his nose. Sit down and let me do my job. Aaron didn't sit, didn't step back, didn't blink. He held Swanson's stare and let the silence answer for him. Swanson broke first, turned and kept searching. Back on the lawn, 200 guests sat frozen in their white chairs, watching their celebration be stripped apart piece by piece. The flower girl, 5 years old, white dress, a pink ribbon in her braided hair, was crying into her mother's lap. She didn't understand what was happening. She only knew the pretty music had stopped, and the men with guns had made everyone go quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. The vineyard, which had been alive with laughter 20 minutes ago, now felt like a room with the air sucked out. Then Victoria arrived. She crossed the property line without a pause, no hesitation, no permission. She walked across the freshly mowed grass, past the floral arch, past the catering tables, past 200 silent guests who turned to watch her with disbelief. She walked directly to Officer Swanson and spoke, loud, sharp, intended for everyone to hear. Officer, thank God you're here. I've been watching these people all morning. They clearly don't belong here. She swept her arm toward the crowd. This land was a respected estate before they got their hands on it. I don't know how they got the money. Frankly, I don't want to know. But this is not the kind of activity our neighborhood tolerates. Denise stood in the middle of the aisle, still in her gown, veil still pinned, bouquet still in her hands, crushed now, petals falling one by one between her fingers like white tears. She looked at Victoria. Their eyes met across 30 feet of grass. Victoria didn't flinch. She looked through Denise the way a person looks through a window, like nothing was there at all. Evelyn rose from her front row chair, slowly, carefully, the way a woman rises when every bone in her body is begging her to stay seated, but her dignity won't allow it. Ma'am, this is my son's wedding day. Please. Her voice was barely above a whisper, thin, trembling. The voice of a woman who had spent 71 years asking politely for respect she should never have had to request. Victoria didn't look at her, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge that a single sound had left Evelyn's mouth. She kept talking to Swanson as if Evelyn were air. I want them removed. All of them. Every single one. Aaron saw it all. He saw his 71-year-old mother standing in her Sunday best, being treated like she was invisible. He saw his bride frozen in the aisle, tears running down her face for the wrong reasons on the wrong day. He saw 200 guests, judges, veterans, doctors, teachers, a sitting governor, held hostage in silence, while a woman who despised them for the color of their skin stood in the center of their joy and demanded it be erased. His hand trembled. Just once, a single tremor through his fingers. He steadied it, drew a breath, let it pass. Then he pulled out his phone, stepped 2 paces from the crowd, dialed a number from memory, 4 words. It's Aaron. Come now. He hung up, slid the phone into his jacket. No one noticed. Not Swanson, not Victoria. Not a single soul on that lawn understood what had just been set into motion. But it was coming. Swanson, performing now. Chest puffed, voice louder than it needed to be, turned to the DJ booth. Aaron's young cousin, 22 years old, headphones resting around his neck, sat behind a laptop and a pair of speakers. Shut it off. Sir, I'm not even playing any... Did I stutter? Shut it off. Unplug everything. The cousin looked across the lawn at Aaron. Aaron met his eyes and gave a small, quiet nod. The cousin unplugged the speakers. The soft electrical hum died. One more piece of the celebration, silenced. Swanson turned to face the seated guests. He raised his voice, projecting across the lawn like a man making an announcement he'd been waiting all day to deliver. Nobody leaves until we've completed our investigation. I need to see identification from everyone present. 200 people asked for papers, at a wedding, on private land, without a warrant, without probable cause, without a shred of evidence that a single law had been broken by anyone other than himself. He began walking through the rows. He stopped at Walter Brown, 68 years old, retired United States Marine, 2 combat tours, a silver star pinned inside a velvet box in his bedroom at home. A man who had bled for the same flag stitched onto Swanson's uniform sleeve. Stand up. Empty your pockets. Walter looked at him, eyes steady, jaw barely moving. I served this country for 24 years, son. I didn't ask for your service record. I said, empty your pockets. Walter stood, slowly, with a dignity so heavy it pressed down on every person watching. He reached into his jacket and placed his belongings on the chair, one by one. A leather wallet worn soft at the edges, a white handkerchief folded into a perfect square, a single peppermint wrapped in cellophane, and a photograph, small, creased at the corners, of his late wife on their wedding day, 41 years ago. Swanson picked up the wallet, opened it, flipped through it like a man leafing through a magazine in a waiting room, put it back down without a word, without an apology, without even looking Walter in the eye. He moved to the next row. Officer Coleman stood at the edge of the lawn, arms crossed, face drawn tight. She hadn't searched anyone, hadn't drawn her weapon, hadn't raised her voice once. She walked to Swanson and spoke low. Dale, we need to call the sergeant. Right now. This has gone too far. Swanson looked at her like she'd insulted his mother. I've got this under control. This doesn't look like control, Dale. This looks like a lawsuit. Then go stand by the car and stay out of my way. Coleman stepped back. But she didn't leave. She didn't look away. Her eyes moved across every face, every gesture, every word. She was watching. And she was remembering all of it. Victoria, meanwhile, had taken out her phone again. Not 911 this time. She was calling the local news tip line. Yes, hello. I'd like to report a developing situation in the Ridgemont area. Police are investigating a large black gathering, possible weapons, possible drugs. I think the public has a right to know what's happening in their community. She wanted cameras. She wanted to be the woman who saved the neighborhood. She wanted her name attached to this moment. She had absolutely no idea what she had just set into motion. None. 11 minutes passed. 11 minutes of Swanson walking through rows of guests like a warden doing count. 11 minutes of Victoria standing with her arms crossed, chin raised, phone in hand, waiting for the cameras she'd summoned. 11 minutes of Denise standing in the aisle in her wedding dress, perfectly still, tears drying in lines down her face. Then the gravel crunched. Not one car, not two. 3 black SUVs rolled up the vineyard road in a slow, tight line. No sirens, no flashing lights, just tinted windows and a kind of silence that felt heavier than noise. They stopped at the gate. Doors opened in unison. Out of the first vehicle stepped Deputy Director Nathan Ellis of the Virginia State Bureau of Investigation. Dark suit, silver badge clipped to his belt. 4 plainclothes agents flanked him, 2 on each side. Out of the third vehicle stepped Sheriff Terrence Whitfield, county's highest-ranking law enforcement officer. Full dress uniform, metal bar across his chest, hat tucked under his arm. He was late. Not because of the call. He'd been invited to the wedding. He was late because he'd stopped to pick up a gift. A bottle of Virginia wine wrapped in gold paper, still sitting on his passenger seat. The agents walked through the gate without asking permission. They didn't need to. Atwell stepped aside and exhaled for the first time in an hour. Swanson saw them from across the lawn. He straightened up, adjusted his sunglasses, tried to look official. Sheriff Whitfield walked directly toward him, not fast, not slow. Every step measured, every footfall deliberate. His face was the color of ash. His jaw was locked so tight, a vein pulsed at his temple. He stopped 2 feet in front of Swanson. Deputy Swanson. Swanson nodded, trying to read the situation. Sheriff, we received a call about... Do you have any idea who this man is? Whitfield's voice was low, controlled, but underneath it, something close to fury. Swanson glanced at Aaron, who stood near the altar with his hands at his sides, watching. He says he's the groom. He says he's the groom. Whitfield repeated it slowly, like he was tasting poison. This man, the man you asked for ID, the man whose property you searched without a warrant, the man whose wedding you stopped, is Aaron Underwood. Swanson blinked. The Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia. The words landed on the vineyard like a hammer on glass. He is the chief law enforcement officer of this state. He commands every agent, every bureau, every task force. He commands the State Bureau of Investigation. He commands internal affairs. Whitfield leaned in, close enough that only Swanson could hear. He commands you. Every drop of color left Swanson's face. His hand fell from his belt. His lips parted, but nothing came out. His knees didn't buckle, but they wanted to. Victoria's phone slipped an inch from her ear. Her smile, that satisfied, self-righteous smile she'd worn for the last half hour, cracked down the middle and fell off her face. 200 guests sat in absolute silence. Not the terrified sounds from before, a different silence. The silence of people watching the earth shift beneath someone's feet. Aaron stepped forward, not aggressively, not dramatically. He simply buttoned his tuxedo jacket and spoke in the exact same voice he had used all afternoon. Calm, steady, unhurried. Officer Swanson, you entered this property without a warrant. You conducted an illegal search of my home, my reception, and my bridal suite. You detained over 200 citizens without probable cause. You humiliated a retired Marine. You silenced a ceremony of God. You made my mother, a 71-year-old retired schoolteacher, stand up and beg a stranger for basic respect. He paused. Let the silence hold. All because a woman across the property line saw black people and called it a crime. He turned to Victoria. Mrs. Caldwell, you filed 2 false police reports today. Under Virginia Code Section 18.2-461, each one is a Class 1 misdemeanor. You made racially motivated statements in front of over 200 witnesses, and you are currently standing on my property without invitation, without permission. Victoria's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You can't. I was just concerned. I'm calling my lawyer. Aaron looked at her, not with anger, not with spite, with something worse, with the quiet, settled certainty of a man who had already decided what came next. Ma'am, I am the law. 4 words. The vineyard didn't breathe. Aaron turned to Deputy Director Ellis and gave a single nod. Ellis stepped forward, his voice carried across the lawn without effort. Officer Swanson, you are hereby relieved of duty, effective immediately. Your badge and sidearm, now. A full investigation will be conducted by Internal Affairs and the Attorney General's Civil Rights Division. Swanson's hands were shaking. He unclipped his badge, unholstered his weapon, handed both over, like a man handing over pieces of himself. Sheriff Whitfield turned to Victoria. Mrs. Caldwell, you will be escorted off this property. You will be formally charged. I suggest you contact that lawyer. Victoria opened her mouth to protest. Whitfield raised one hand. Ma'am, not another word. He took her by the arm, firmly, not roughly, and walked her toward the patrol car. Her heels caught in the grass. Her mascara was running. Her chin, which had been so high all afternoon, dropped for the first time. Officer Coleman stood by the gate. She hadn't been named. She hadn't been accused. Ellis glanced at her file later that evening. One note stood out. Only officer on scene who attempted de-escalation. She would be remembered for that. Swanson was walked to the patrol car by 2 of Ellis's agents, one on each side. His badge was gone. His holster was empty. His sunglasses, still on his face, suddenly looked ridiculous, like a costume from a role he was no longer playing. Halfway across the gravel drive, he stopped, turned. Sir, Mr. Attorney General, I was just responding to a call. I didn't know who... Aaron's voice cut through the air. Not loud, not sharp, just final. You didn't need to know who I was to treat those people with dignity. Swanson opened his mouth. Nothing came out. If I had been a plumber, a teacher, a truck driver, you would have done every single thing you did today exactly the same way. The only difference is, no one would have come. No SUVs, no sheriff, no consequences. Aaron held his gaze. That's the problem, officer. Not that you didn't recognize me, that you didn't recognize them. Swanson's chin dropped. His eyes hit the gravel. The agents guided him into the back seat of a patrol car and closed the door. Through the window, he stared at nothing. His hands sat in his lap like they didn't belong to him anymore. On the other side of the lawn, Victoria Caldwell was being escorted toward a second patrol car by Sheriff Whitfield. She was not going quietly. This is outrageous. I am a taxpayer. I am a homeowner. I have every right to report suspicious activity in my own neighborhood. Whitfield said nothing. He walked. I'm calling the governor. Do you hear me? I know people. I will have your badge for this. Whitfield stopped. He turned to face her with the patience of a man who had heard every kind of threat from every kind of person. Ma'am, the governor was invited to this wedding. Victoria blinked. He seated in row 4. He watched everything. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. I suggest you stop talking. He guided her to the car, opened the rear door. She hesitated, heels planted in the gravel, hands shaking, mascara streaked in 2 dark lines down her cheeks. For the first time all afternoon, she looked small. Whitfield placed one hand on her shoulder. Not violently, not gently, definitively. She ducked into the back seat. The door closed. The lock clicked. Through the window, she could see the vineyard, the white chairs, the floral arch, the people she had tried to erase, still there. Bradley Caldwell watched from his second-floor balcony across the property line. He had seen everything. He had done nothing. He stood with both hands on the railing and the expression of a man who had just realized the woman he married was going to cost him everything. He didn't come down. He didn't call a lawyer. He just stood there. Back at the altar, Aaron walked to Denise. She was still in the aisle, exactly where she had been standing when the world cracked open. Her bouquet was ruined, petals scattered on the grass around her feet like white confetti from the wrong kind of celebration. Aaron took her hands, both of them. He held them the way you hold something precious that almost fell. "We're not done." Denise laughed. It came out broken and wet, half sob, half joy, the sound of a woman putting herself back together, one breath at a time. "We're really doing this? We are absolutely doing this." Pastor Raymond Davis cleared his throat. He straightened his Bible. He looked out at the congregation, shaken, tear-streaked, still trembling, and said, "Well, if anyone else has an objection, I strongly suggest you keep it to yourself." Laughter. Real, deep, uncontrollable laughter. The kind that rises from the belly and shakes loose every knot the last hour had tied. A woman in the third row covered her face and sobbed into her laughter. A groomsman wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Even the federal judge in row 2 cracked a smile. The string quartet picked up their bows. The processional began again. Denise walked the rest of the aisle on Gerald's arm. This time, her feet moved. This time, her smile stayed. Aaron watched her come toward him, and his voice broke before he even began his vows. "I promise to protect this family the way my father protected ours, with patience, with grace, and without ever backing down." Evelyn, in the front row, pressed her husband's photograph against her chest and wept. Not the trembling, fearful tears from before. These were different. These were the tears of a woman watching her son become exactly who his father had prayed he would be. They kissed. The vineyard erupted. 200 people on their feet, clapping, crying, cheering, children running between the chairs, the string quartet playing something bright and fast and alive. The sun was still up, the wine was still cold, the flowers were still blooming, and the wedding, their wedding, was theirs again. Monday morning, 8 a.m., the offices of the Virginia Attorney General. Aaron sat at his desk, signed one document, and stepped away from the case entirely. He recused himself. No press conference, no dramatic statement. He simply filed the paperwork, handed the folder to his deputy, and said, "Run it clean. I don't want anyone saying this was personal." It didn't matter. The case didn't need him. The evidence was already a flood. The Civil Rights Division opened a formal investigation into Officer Dale Swanson within hours. Body camera footage was pulled first. Every second was there. The arrival, the dismissal of valid permits, the illegal entry, the search of the bridal suite, the demand for IDs, the moment Walter Brown was told to empty his pockets. The dashcam caught Swanson's face when Sheriff Whitfield arrived. It also caught the exact moment he realized who Aaron was. That footage alone would have been enough. But there was more. Over 40 wedding guests submitted sworn statements in the first 72 hours. 12 of them were practicing attorneys. 3 were sitting judges. 1 was a retired 4-star general. 1 was the governor of Virginia. Every statement told the same story, word for word, detail for detail. There was no ambiguity, no gray area, no room to spin. The 911 recordings were obtained Tuesday morning. Analysts from the Civil Rights Division flagged the language immediately. The coded phrases, the manufactured urgency, the escalation from gathering to weapons, with zero evidence. Victoria's second call was classified as a deliberate fabrication. Prosecutors tagged both calls as racially motivated false reporting. Then Cassandra Blake got involved. Blake was an investigative reporter for Channel 9, sharp, relentless, and 3 years into building a reputation for stories no one else would touch. She'd received a tip Sunday night from someone at the wedding. By Wednesday morning, she had the 911 audio, 2 guest interviews, and a 12-minute segment ready to air. The title? A Wedding, a Lie, and the Attorney General Next Door. It aired at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. By midnight, it had been shared 400,000 times. By Thursday morning, it was everywhere. Cable news, network morning shows, podcasts, social media. The 911 audio was played on every major network in the country. Victoria's voice, sharp, entitled, dripping with disgust, became the sound of something millions of people recognized but rarely heard recorded so clearly. Then the cell phone videos surfaced. Guests had been recording. Of course they had. 12 different angles captured Victoria crossing the property line, standing in the middle of a black wedding and declaring, "These people don't belong here." One video caught her ignoring Evelyn. Another caught Swanson ordering Walter Brown to empty his pockets. Another caught the flower girl crying. The footage was shared millions of times. It trended on every platform for 6 straight days. Internet sleuths went to work on Victoria Caldwell's history. They didn't have to dig deep. Her social media was a museum of contempt. 3 previous 911 calls about suspicious black families, one at a public park, one about a black-owned food truck she described as lowering neighborhood standards, one about a black teenager playing basketball in a cul-de-sac, a neighborhood association email chain where she lobbied against affordable housing, calling it an invitation for the wrong element. Pattern, exposed, documented, undeniable. Bradley Caldwell's real estate firm, Caldwell Premier Properties, began hemorrhaging clients by Friday. 3 major commercial contracts canceled within a week. A corporate partner issued a public statement distancing themselves from the Caldwell name. By the end of the month, the firm had lost an estimated 40% of its active portfolio. Then came the courtroom. Victoria Caldwell was charged with 2 counts of filing a false police report, Class 1 misdemeanor each, 1 count of criminal trespass, and, following the Civil Rights Division's review of her documented history of racially motivated complaints, a hate crime enhancement was added to every charge. Her attorney, a high-priced defense lawyer from Richmond, tried to frame her as a concerned citizen who had simply made a mistake. He used the words neighborhood safety 11 times in his opening statement. The prosecution played the 911 tapes, played the cell phone footage, presented the sworn statements from 43 witnesses, displayed Victoria's own emails on a screen for the jury to read, and then called Evelyn Moore to the stand. Evelyn sat in the witness chair, hands folded in her lap, and described, in a voice so quiet the courtroom leaned forward to hear, what it felt like to stand up at her son's wedding, ask a stranger for kindness, and be treated like she was invisible. The courtroom was silent for 11 seconds after she finished. The court reporter stopped typing. A juror in the back row wiped her eyes. Judge Helen Crawford presided, 61 years old, No nonsense. She had seen every kind of case walk through her courtroom. This one, she later told a colleague, was among the clearest she'd ever tried. 12 jurors deliberated for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Guilty. All counts. Sentence: 18 months in county jail, 12 suspended. 300 hours of community service at the Virginia Civil Rights Memorial Museum. A $50,000 fine. A permanent restraining order barring Victoria from the Ridgemont estate and any contact with the Underwood family. Mandatory completion of a racial bias education program. Officer Dale Swanson was tried separately, charged with unlawful search, unlawful detention, and abuse of authority, found guilty on all counts, sentenced to 12 months probation. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked by the state licensing board. He would never wear a badge again. Officer Rita Coleman was not charged. She was commended in the final investigation report for being the only officer on scene who attempted to de-escalate. The case didn't stop at the courtroom. Virginia's state legislature fast-tracked a new bill within 90 days of the verdict. It was called the Underwood-Collins Fair Reporting Act, named for the groom and the bride whose wedding had been turned into a crime scene by a single phone call. The bill imposed felony-level penalties for racially motivated false police reports, with enhanced sentencing when the report disrupted a legally permitted event or targeted someone on their own property. Governor Philip Anderson signed it on the steps of the state capitol on a cold Tuesday in December. Aaron and Denise stood behind him. Evelyn sat in the front row of the audience, her husband's photograph in her lap. The pen the governor used was given to Aaron afterward. He gave it to his mother. 6 months later, the Ridgemont estate was in bloom. The grapevines had thickened through the fall and come back stronger in spring. New leaves curled along the wire trellises in long, even rows. The floral arch from the wedding had been replaced with a permanent stone archway. Aaron and Denise's names carved into the keystone, along with the date. Couples had started reaching out, dozens of them, from across the state, then from across the country. They wanted to hold their weddings at the vineyard where a ceremony was interrupted and still finished, where love didn't fold. The waiting list stretched 18 months out. Aaron and Denise settled into their life quietly. No interviews, no book deals, no victory laps. Aaron went back to work Monday through Friday. Denise returned to the hospital, where she held newborns in her hands and stitched children back together. They ate dinner at the same table every night. They were ordinary on purpose. Evelyn planted a garden on the east side of the estate. Small, careful. Lavender and rosemary and climbing jasmine along a low stone wall. She worked it every Saturday morning with her hands in the dirt and her husband's photograph propped up on a rock nearby. She called it the Patience Garden. Because patience, she told Denise one afternoon, pulling a weed from between 2 lavender stalks, is the only reason any of us are still standing. Officer Rita Coleman was promoted 4 months after the wedding. She now led a community policing initiative in the county, focused on de-escalation training, bias awareness, and rebuilding trust between law enforcement and the communities they served. In her first address to new recruits, she told them about the Underwood wedding. She told them about Walter Brown emptying his pockets. She told them about the flower girl crying. I stood there and watched it happen, she said. I spoke up once, and it wasn't enough. Don't be me. Be better than me. Be louder. Victoria Caldwell served her 6 months quietly. No outbursts, no media statements, no apologies either. Upon release, she listed the estate for sale. It sold in 9 days, to a black family from Richmond with 3 children and a golden retriever. Bradley Caldwell filed for divorce before the closing papers were signed. The last anyone heard, Victoria had moved to a small town in another state where no one knew her name. She never spoke publicly about what happened. The vineyard produced its first commercial wine that spring, a small batch red, aged in oak barrels Aaron had built himself in the barn during the winter months. The label was simple, a silhouette of a bride and groom standing beneath a stone arch, vines climbing on either side. The name on the bottle? Patience. It sold out in 11 days. Aaron gave one interview, just one, to Cassandra Blake, the reporter who had broken the story. They sat on the vineyard porch in 2 wooden chairs, late afternoon light stretching across the vines. She asked him what the hardest part was. He didn't hesitate. Watching my mother's face. He paused, looked out at the vines. If I had been a teacher, a plumber, a truck driver, everything that happened that day would have played out the same. Every single thing. The only difference is no one would have come. No SUVs, no sheriff, no consequences. Justice showed up at my wedding because I happened to be the one man who could summon it. And that should terrify every single one of us. So here's what I want to know from you. If Aaron hadn't been the Attorney General, if he'd been just a regular man marrying the love of his life on his own land, do you think any of this would have ended the same way? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm genuinely asking. If this story hit you somewhere, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Stories like this don't tell themselves, and they don't reach people without you. Justice shouldn't depend on who you know or what title's on your badge. It should show up for everyone. At every wedding, every traffic stop, every front porch. Until that's true, we keep telling these stories. See you in the next one.
I keep coming back to the same question. What if he was nobody? What if he was the regular guy, a teacher, a plumber, a truck driver, getting married on his own land? Would anyone have come? Would there have been consequences? Would it have sold out? And we all know the answer. No, it wouldn't. And that's the problem. Justice sold up that day because one man had the power to make a phone call. But what about everybody else? What about the people who don't have the phone call, who don't have the title, who just have to stand there and take it? And hope somebody someday cares enough to do something. They deserve the same protection, the same respect, the same justice. Not because of who they know, not because of what on their business card, because they are human. That should be the only qualification. So, until justice shows up the same way for everyone, for the plumber and the attorney general, they haven't fixed anything. They were just gotten lucky that the right person was standing in the wrong situation. Like, share, and subscribe. Real stories, real justice every week. And remember, justice that only shows for the powerful isn't justice. It's a privilege, and nobody should have to learn the right to be treated like a person.